I'm looking at the chessboard and I'm seeing there's only one move my opponent can make, and it's good for me. They have to print money. They don't have a choice. You cannot run a debt-based financial system in some form of austerity or deflation. It doesn't work. Inflation is implied in the system that is built. Point blank, period. That Bitcoin's the best expression of currency debasement. It's the best index on liquidity in the financial system, guys. Trust on this. Bitcoin remained over 100K. 100K is the new floor. Guys, 100K was all-time high like less than a year ago. It's tricking you. And consumer sentiment is trying to catch up to gold. And consumer sentiment and gold is trying to catch up to Bitcoin. Bitcoin tells you the future. Bitcoin tells you the truth.
In today's video, Jack Mallers lays it out plain and simple. The United States government has no choice but to print. From Jerome Powell's exit to the 2026 election cycle, Jack breaks down why both parties will crank the money printer back on and why Bitcoin's about to explode because of it. He exposes the illusion of prosperity, the return of stimulus, and why inflation isn't a mistake, it's baked into the system. As Jack says, Bitcoin tells the truth, and it's screaming louder than ever. Join our Telegram group for daily Bitcoin insights. Links in the description.
The U.S. government has no choice. The Federal Reserve has no choice. And I've said, guys, I know Bitcoin 4-year cycles. I know all the chart bros on Twitter say that technically in October 17th at 472 UTC, the bull market ended because the stars aligned. Guess what? I don't give a fuck. I'm looking at the chessboard and I'm seeing there's only one move my opponent can make, and it's good for me. They have to print money. They don't have a choice. 2026 has to structurally be a massive year. Jerome Powell is leaving the Fed. Before he even departs, he's getting brought on side because there's no more reserves in the banking system. There's no more reserves in the banking system because all of them are going to financing the U.S. government. It is time for Trump and Besant to run the printer back turbo in 2026 and hand out goodies to the people for midterms. Okay? The government's back. All of the austerity, all of the Doge, all of the Elon shit is getting slowly unwound. Remember when Elon was going to manage our finances like a startup and save this country? Remember when we were firing everybody in the U.S. government that is so obviously fraudulent scammers, scamming the American taxpayers, scamming the American people? Well, all of that's being unwound and put back in place. The first 6 months of this administration, none of that progress is going to be sustainable, and we're turning back the government on, and it's all about printing money. It's all about adding reserves to this financial system because you cannot run a debt-based financial system in some form of austerity or deflation. It doesn't work. Inflation is implied in the system that is built. Point blank, period. And you guys want to know why Bitcoin went up over the weekend? Guys, it is reacting to this. Whether you're left or right, blue or red, the financial system needs reserves. So the Fed, pause QT. You're starting to see Myron advocate for a 50 basis point cut in December after we just got a 25-point cut. 50 basis point cut in December, resume QE. We need to add hundreds of billions of dollars to the balance sheet. Dems and Republicans, quit the fighting, get the government back on because the money printing has to commence. This system fails on its face if you do not keep printing money. Okay? Next, from Trump, people that are against tariffs are fools. We are now the richest, most respected country in the world with almost no inflation and a record stock market price. 401ks are highest ever. We are taking in trillions of dollars and will soon begin paying down our enormous debt of $37 trillion. Record investments in the United States of America, plants and factories going up all over the place, a dividend of at least $2,000 a person, not including high-income people, will be paid to everyone. Obviously, this tweet, or whatever this is, this Truth Social is hilarious for many reasons. One of these reasons is because we're about to pay down all of our debt, but first, I'm going to give everyone $2,000. Well, you're not paying down the debt. If you could pay down the debt, you'd pay down the debt. Why are you giving everyone $2,000 instead of extinguishing your debt? This doesn't make any sense. And then the other, stimmies are fucking back, baby. Stimmies are back. This is the most inflationary thing you could possibly do, is basically hand everyone to purchasing power on the house to go inject it into the economy. Last time this happened, markets had never been more bullish. Asset prices had never been more inflated. And I'm telling you guys, Bitcoin is starting to smell and sniff this out. Follow the Bitcoin price if you want to follow the money printing and the liquidity. I've said Bitcoin's the best expression of currency debasement. It's the best index on liquidity in the financial system, guys. Trust on this. The last few weeks we've said there's a liquidity crisis brewing. Funding markets are under serious stress. The Fed is printing money to ensure that these markets don't get out of control. Boom, government comes back. Boom, stimmies. For someone to sit here and look at me and say, yeah, we topped, the Bitcoin cycle is over. I'm sorry. You got hit in your head as a child. I'm sorry. I call the world how I see it. I don't see anything telling me anything other than number go up. And the fact that through all of this funding stress, through the Fed and the US Treasury fighting about how the US government's going to finance itself, through a government shutdown where the TGA ran up to $1 trillion balance, Bitcoin remained over 100K. 100K is the new floor. Guys, 100K was all-time high like less than a year ago. What are we talking about? Our all-time high within the last 12 months is now the new floor through dramatic liquidity stress in the financial market right before the year of midterms, as the president's tweeting out stimmies and doing deals with the Democrats that unwind all of his violent progress of firing them all. I'm supposed to be bearish? Oh, you guys got the wrong guy. I mean, the podcast gets all so tiresome, and I know it feels repetitive, but I mean, this is just the truth of the matter, guys. Like, they have to print the money. I'm not, like, you guys can't convince me to be bearish on Bitcoin right now. You can't. And through all of the liquidity stress, I mean, Bitcoin's at 106. It was at, okay, in fairness, it dipped below 100 for like a few hours, but it was around 100 to 102, and then the government coming back online dropped and it popped to 106. And once the government does come back and the TGA starts to get spent, it'll pop again. And once the Fed cuts rates again in December and resumes QE, and it'll pop again. And I cannot imagine this thing going anywhere but up. And this slide is a reminder that Bitcoin is a global financial asset. Bitcoin is competing to be the world reserve currency. Let's be clear about that. And so there's money printing everywhere. When the US prints money, everyone else has to print money. It's a game of who can have the weakest currency, guys. I've told you guys this before. If you care about manufacturing, if you care about having cheap labor, implied in that means you have to have a cheap currency. We've said on the show before, if the US really wants to solve their problems, I can solve it in 10 seconds. Don't be the world reserve currency. Boom, problem solved. Then your currency will naturally weaken. Your deficits will naturally go away. Now the problem is that won't get you reelected. So how do they solve this problem while getting reelected? I don't know. That's why I'm not in politics. That's why I build software for the people. But the point is, China is not going to sit idly and let the US debase its currency and compete in manufacturing. The US wants to weaken the dollar. China's going to weaken their currency as well. The money printing has to commence everywhere. So this from the PBOC. The PBOC's net purchases effectively increase the supply of cash in the financial system, helping to contain borrowing costs and support economic growth. Demand for bonds has eased among investors in recent months due to a fund rotation into equities and easing tensions in US-China trade relations. Money printing everywhere. They're going to run it turbo in 2026. That is what I think. Now, I tried to tweet this chart. I'm gonna admit I kind of botched the tweet a little bit. But what we're looking at here is the University of Michigan consumer sentiment in white and the S&P 500 in blue. Okay? The point of this chart, and for those listening, is that consumer sentiment in America and the stock market were 1-to-1. They equaled each other. Stock market went down, consumer sentiment was bad. Stock market had all-time highs, consumer sentiment was good. Now, what you can see very clearly is this broke in 2020 in COVID, where the stock market went up, and consumer sentiment has gone down since. Consumer sentiment is lower today than it was during the 2008 financial crisis and the years that followed. I'm going to say that again. The stock market is at an all-time high. Consumer sentiment is at an all-time low in the last 25 years. The people are in pain, but assets are at all-time highs. Now, if I then overlay the stock market measured in gold and the stock market measured in Bitcoin on this chart, it tells a much more honest story. So what are we looking at? In white, consumer sentiment. In blue, the S&P 500. In yellow, you're looking at the stock market, the S&P 500 measured in gold. The S&P 500 measured in gold matches about consumer sentiment. It makes a lot more sense. So we're measuring the S&P 500 in the wrong ruler. We're using the wrong measuring system. Dollars are pointless. They're worthless. They're distorting reality. If you measure the stock market in gold, you'd realize the world has been going to shit for decades. And that no one's job out of college is outpacing inflation. There's a K-shaped economy that's already been formed. Most of America has been living through a recession, a depression, a real depression. I've said on this show before, you all have been living through a depression. You're like, man, I wonder what it was like during the Great Depression. You're living through one. Just measure it in the right asset, because during the real Great Depression, 100 years ago, the dollar was backed by gold. Now the dollar is backed by someone clicking a keystroke on a computer. So if you measure it in gold like it was during the Great Depression years prior, you're living through one right now. And on this chart, this is my favorite part, I put the S&P 500 against Bitcoin. Look at that. As soon as Bitcoin launched, the S&P 500 measured against Bitcoin went to zero as fast as it could. And so the way I read this chart is the blue line is a distorted version of reality. It's not real, because consumer sentiment, gold, and Bitcoin tell the opposite story. It's tricking you. And consumer sentiment is trying to catch up to gold. And consumer sentiment and gold is trying to catch up to Bitcoin. Bitcoin tells you the future. Bitcoin tells you the truth. You can't cheat Bitcoin. You can't confiscate it in central banks and governments. You can't go on and off, the gold reserve. We divorced from the gold reserve. We're back on it. Can't do that. Bitcoin doesn't need anybody. It is a self-contained, self-operated financial system. You can't cheat it. So you want to see a piercing truth? Do you want to look outside the window and see the universe as it really is? This is it. Bitcoin is showing you how bad things actually are and where consumer sentiment is actually going. Consumer sentiment is going to find that orange line. So will gold.
Jack Mallers is dead on here. He's reading the macro chessboard and seeing what few are willing to admit. The United States has no choice but to print. With shrinking bank reserves, rising debt, and 2026 politics ahead, the Fed will have to flood the system with liquidity again. When Jack says inflation is implied in the system, he's exposing the truth. The entire debt-based economy only survives through expansion. His comparison of the S&P 500 measured in gold and Bitcoin hits hard. Markets look strong only because the dollar is weak. So when he ends with consumer sentiment is going to find that orange line, he's really saying reality will catch up, and Bitcoin, the honest measuring stick, will reveal it first. Bottom line, Mallers sees 2026 as the next liquidity wave, and Bitcoin as the only asset built to surf it.
When you live on the orange line, life gets cheaper. When you live on the blue line, life gets more expensive. So the white line is consumer sentiment inversed. So that's Bitcoiner sentiment. Since Bitcoin has launched, the world has gotten better for Bitcoiners. It's a bigger place. It's happier. We're healthier. Since I became a Bitcoiner, I've gotten healthier. I've gotten more educated. I've fallen in love. I plan to have loads and loads of children. I've started businesses, and I've been able to accrue savings for my future. I've been able to stack sats. I've become a net producer to society. This is the fiat world, the blue line tricking you. It's like underwater, underground is the truth. And above water, this blue line, Trump says, oh, stock market's at all-time highs. You flip the chart, that's what becoming a Bitcoiner is. Exit the blue line, get on the orange train.
And that's the truth. Jack Mallers is driving home. The money printer isn't stopping. And Bitcoin is the only exit from a system built on endless debt and illusion. If you found this breakdown useful, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment on where you think Bitcoin heads next.